swear my life would be so much easier if Goodreads just hired a proper developer to make this site, because what is it doing? Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am CHIOMA, aka Chi, and today I'm going to be doing my December wrap up. December was a good reading month despite finals, and it's because I had to read I think 10 books to reach my Goodreads goal of 75, which I did. So yeah, let's get into the video. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the only 2 physical books I actually read in December. My goal for December was to actually clear out my Kindle Unlimited queue, so that was the goal, and I think I achieved that. But let's talk about the first 2 books that I read, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and Take a Hint, Dani Brown. So these 2 books are by Talia Hibbert. She is a Black author and she writes romances. So I initially picked both of these up because I thought they were Black love romances, but they're not. So these ones are still very cute. I gave Get a Life, Chloe Brown 3 stars. So this book was really, I'm not gonna lie, I don't read a lot of contemporaries. These 2 books make up 66 2/3 of all of the contemporary books I read this year, which means that they were 2 out of the 3. And this one, it was kind of really reading why I don't like contemporary for most of the book. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Most of the book was just kind of mundane. I felt it was, I really liked the insight into Chloe's character as she relates to the chronic pain and the chronic issues that she suffers with. I really enjoyed that part of her character. I think Red honestly was kind of bland. He kind of seemed like a white boy with a chip on his shoulder, which, you know, is a personality, I guess. And then something interesting about, so let me tell you a little bit about this. So Chloe Brown wants to divest from the kind of scrutiny of her family because she does have chronic illnesses. She's kind of felt like she's under a microscope. She is almost hit by a car, or she's kind of at the scene of a car accident, and her life kind of flashes before her eyes, and she starts to realize that she needs to get her life together. She doesn't want to kind of continue living at her parents' house. She doesn't want to kind of keep living life very straight edge, basically. So she makes a list called the Get a Life list of all the things that she wants to do to get a life, and one of those things is moving into the building in which Red is the superintendent. One thing that was so interesting, I did not know Talia Hibbert. I actually still don't know. Oh, she's a Black British author. That's literally the first line in her synopsis is Talia Hibbert is a Black British author. I did not know the characters were this in British. I didn't know the characters were in this were British until they just started saying things, and I was like, my American cannot compute. I cannot compute. I was just like, you know what? I think they might be in England. And it goes through kind of both of this sides, because they both kind of have past that kind of made them extremely guarded, both Red and Chloe extremely guarded, which makes them also extremely guarded towards each other. And it's kind of a story how they come together and how they are both resisting them fully reaching their potential together because of their past and the realities that they face on day to day. So for the first, I say 75% of this book, maybe not 75, 60% of the book was pretty mundane to me. It was kind of mundane and kind of boring, just because it's a contemporary, and Red just seemed like his personality was just like, I'm a struggling artist. And Chloe was very interesting. I do really like her character. I just think she has a lot of personality, and I think she's very original. I think she's very posh, as they say. And what accent was that? I think she was very posh, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed her as a character. Red was all right. He just wasn't very interesting to me. He wasn't really attractive to me in my head. I also learned that I'm low-key a prude or a prune. I do not know the saying, but I cannot take smut in contemporary. If these 2 books taught me anything, smut in contemporary is too much for me. It's too much for me. I can't handle it. I cannot handle it. I don't know why the more realistic set of a contemporary novel makes smut a deal breaker, but there's a scene in the beginning of this book that I was just like, I wasn't ready. I don't think I ever would be ready, and I don't think I can be ready or want to be ready. It was much. It was much. I'm not gonna lie. So I don't think I can take smut in contemporary. That's what I learned from this book. But I think the ending, I don't know, it was interesting. So I think when I think about contemporary romances, I think for 75% of the book, it always flatlines. So it's flat, and then something happens. It's usually a miscommunication trope, which I abhor. I hate those. Or it's just like, actually at this penultimate point in our relationship, I realized that I can't do it because of trust issues, because of previous relationship baggage, because of this, that, and the third. Things that like just really shouldn't be a deal breaker. And this happens 15 pages left in the book, and I don't know, it was okay. I gave it 3 stars because I really liked Chloe, and yeah, I do love the plus size representation in this book. I love, obviously, Black women are never the romantic interest in anything, so I love when that's intentionally done. I do love how it was representation for people who have chronic illness. I do love the representation, and honestly that did bump it up to a 3.3 to 3.5, because like honestly it just makes it more fun to read, because if that wasn't present in this book, So that was this book. Okay, so the next book is Dani Brown, or the full name is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This one I gave 4 stars. This one I think was significantly better than Get Into Life, Chloe Brown. Okay, so this one's about Dani Brown. She's a PhD student. We love a Black woman in higher education. I love it. I loved that part. And I loved Dani Brown just because I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's very demonized, and don't know any other word but demonized in our society for a person to be very invested or hyper-focused on their work or their higher education. And as someone who has that personality type, I always feel like I'm on the opposite side of that. But I love how Dani Brown was also on that same side of that. She's just like, it's school comes first. School comes first. Like, yeah, we are working for the man and we live in a capitalistic society. Low-key, school is just not a positive pace for a lot of type of learners to be able to excel and reach their potential, nor is school the end or be all for success in this world. But school comes first to me as someone in school. So I honestly love that, and I love Zephyr. I also loved him. I think the author Talia Hibbert tried really hard to make Zephyr into the anti-toxic masculinity person, into someone who is really anti-toxic masculinity. One point I absolutely loved in this book, and again I think it just speaks to why we need to include diverse characters in this book, is Zephyr has generalized anxiety disorder. So I love that there was generalized anxiety disorder rep, because I also have generalized anxiety disorder, and she also puts in a trigger warning in the beginning for people who have generalized anxiety disorder. And I felt like when I first read it, I was just like, why would you put that? But I don't think I've ever read a book, it doesn't even go too much in detail, but I don't think I've ever read a book in which they describe the physiological occurrences that happen when you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack in this book very vividly. And to honest, I think that trigger warning is extremely important, because even reading about that, literally I could feel my heart rate racing or speeding up when Zephyr was having an anxiety attack and when he was having a panic attack or an anxiety attack. So that, I just feel like, first of all, that was interesting. I learned something about myself, and second of all, I love that rep because I think she did do it well to understand kind of the everyday occurrences of someone who has generalized anxiety, as opposed to someone who is feeling anxiety like in this moment or before a certain event. I feel like that was done really great. So the romance in here was cute. I feel like the penultimate point, if you read romances, you know, was done more realistically in this one than in Chloe Brown. So I did give this one 4 stars, and I actually do recommend this one. It's a fake dating trope, which I honestly don't think I've ever read. I've seen fake dating in K-dramas, and I think in one Taiwanese drama that I've watched before. I cannot remember the names of them. I would probably mispronounce them, but I love them in like my dramas. Those are fun tropes in dramas, but I never read a book in it, and it was pretty fun in this one as well. So the next 3 books I read were part of the same series. They are the Wraith Queen series by Grace Javon, and the first book is called Radiance, and the second book is called Eidolon, and the third book is called The Epos King. So the first book in this series was so much better than I thought it was. I didn't know a lot about this book. I've actually had it on my Kindle for like a year or more, but some of my favorite booktubers started talking about it, and I was just like, I need a book to get me out of a slump, so let me read it. And it was so good. It was completely a romance. So it's basically about this human who has to wed this alien magical creature, and they both have to wed the other. They both find the other species absolutely disgusting. This was so fun because I feel like it's always the perspective of the human looking at the other race and being like, oh my gosh, you're so ugly, but everyone thinks humans are the most beautiful creature ever, which is probably unrealistic. Like if aliens come to Earth, we're probably just not gonna think that all humans are the ish. They're probably not gonna think that. So I think it was fun how they did that in this book. And so they both have to wed, and they are both kind of not really scared, but very weary of the other. So the humans think that the Kai are just kind of like ruthless, not really ruthless, but they think they're just like monsters. They have like, you know, fangs for all of their teeth. They have sharp claws. They think they're so ugly. And the Kai just think the humans are really weak looking eels. And they have to wed because they're both kind of political pawns for each other's kind of kingdom. So they have to wed, and they're just kind of friends in the beginning. Like they both kind of like each other really amicably. And then you really see that blossom. And I never thought I was a fan of friends to lovers. I actually hate friends to lovers when it involves a love triangle. Like if it's a love triangle with a friend, a actual love interest, and then someone else, like I hate that. But it was done so good in this book because I think Grace Javelin writes romances so well. Like when you can feel and really feel them falling in love, and you can really see the progression and the changes in the characters falling in love, amazing, amazing. Also, can we talk about Grace Javelin's writing? Just the most gorgeous writing. Grace Javelin, if she writes a thriller, if she writes a horror, if she writes anything genre that I don't read, I'll probably read it. Her writing is absolutely wonderful, just beautiful and just breathtaking and so eloquent, so like yummy. I don't know how to explain it, but I love it. Also, her vocabulary, like when I tell you I read this on Kindle and I was so grateful because I swear every 4 pages I was clicking that dictionary button because I don't know what the heck these words mean. Like I probably learned more vocabulary in reading these 3 books than I did all of college, all of undergrad. First book focuses on Idiko and Brishan. Brishan is the Kai prince. He's a Kai prince, but he's not in line for the throne, so he's kind of a throwaway. And Idiko is kind of just like, I think she's the daughter of someone who was in the royal family. So they meet. It's kind of their love story. You get a little bit of insight into the world. You get a little bit insight into the type of the species of the Kai and some of their magic. Very, very, I just want to say delicious writing. Now the second book was a whole nother story. Just as beautiful, just as gorgeous, but when Grace said, let's put aside the romance for a second and make a fantasy book, that's what she did. She did that. Because there was still so much romance in this book, but it was not the main plot. It was not the main plot. It was really about kind of like what is going on. And I don't want to give too much on it because it's a series, so it'll spoil the previous book, but she gave plot, she gave fantasy, she gave world building, she gave kind of battle scenes, she gave a new character development, she gave it all to us. I absolutely adored the second book. The second book I gave 5 stars. The first book I gave 4 stars. So the second book took us there. The third book was less so. So the third book actually follows 2 sub-characters that were kind of pretty significant in the first 2 books. And I did actually really like these characters individually, but I think the third book, I wasn't prepared for the amount of world building that was going to be there. So it kind of changed the trajectory of the series for me. So the first book was mainly romance, then with a little bit of fantasy. The second book was mainly fantasy, then with that side of romance. This one was really, really world building. And the romance, I didn't feel it being built as well as I did in the first 2 books. It was really more about the world building, and that would have been fine. I feel like if this would have came within the first book, but I felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. But it did fit with the plot of this book, but I don't think I followed it as smoothly or enjoyed it as much as I did the first 2. So the third book, The Epos King, I will give 3 stars. But I definitely recommend this if you are a romance lover. If you're a romance lover, I think this is a great romance series. It's been a long time since I feel like I read something other than the 2 contemporaries I just showed you that was so romance heavy, but this one was so okay. Now let's get into what I'm pretty sure is my favorite book of the year. I really need to go back and think, but as of right now, Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar is taking the seat on the throne. That was the best book that I have read in 2020. Honestly, it went off. It went ham. It was such a good book. It was such a good book, and I tried my best to read and vlog it. I don't know how people read and vlog. That was not my portion. I was not good at it, but hopefully I posted at least like some clips of it because I had so much to say about this book because I loved it. So it follows Felix. So Felix is a Black transgender person who I think is in either their second to last or their last year in high school. So they are in this arts program, the summer arts program, and they are trying to vie for the scholarship that is given to one student in this arts program. So Felix does not come from a high income background at all. Their father is really trying to work really, really hard to send Felix into this prestigious program and then to send Felix to school and then also have a place to live. So their father is working really, really hard for this. Their father has also done other things that have been beneficial to Felix's transition, but at the same time, their father is also kind of resisting the transition and resisting identifying Felix for who they are. And it's really, the father is a very dichotomous character because I feel like the way the author wrote the father, I think they wanted the reader to really think and really go back and forth and like, is the father like, do I like the father? Is the father supportive? Yeah, he's trying, but why should it be so hard to try? It was a lot. I feel like I tugged and tugged at the father and Felix Ever After so much, but let me not to go into too much detail. And then all of a sudden someone starts blackmailing Felix. Someone looks up pictures of Felix before they transition from their Instagram, and then all also dead names Felix, puts Felix's dead name on a kind of gallery in the school, and then basically starts taunting Felix through kind of Instagram messages. And it is a lot. This book is heart-wrenching, but also I think for me as someone who is not a part of this community, very informative, and I think also something that just really I'm so happy I read, because you really don't know what kind of internalized ignorance you have, not to put it harshly, but honestly internalized ignorance that you have when you do not go through, do not understand someone's experience. And I think I'm just going to continue reading like all books by Case and Calendar, because it was just heart-wrenching but so beautifully done, beautifully written. I think Felix's journey from the beginning to the end of this book was just so beautiful and heart-wrenching and so authentic, and honestly I think it was just so beautiful. It's also an all queer cast, so with the exception of Felix's father, it's an all queer cast, which I think was also amazing, because I think it's honestly kind of best done that way, because we see all hetero casts all the time, and for us to be thinking that there cannot be just a group of like 10 kids at a school who are all part of a community who only want to hang out with each other, I think that makes perfect sense. So I honestly really love that, and this was just such a beautiful book. I recommend this to every single person in the whole wide world because it was such a beautiful book. It dealt with the intersectionalities of being a transgendered person as well as being a Black transgendered person in New York, which is typically seen as a very progressive place, but how there is so much internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia, even within communities that you assume should be just very accepting. So I could go on for days, but Felix Ever After was the best book I read this month, probably the best book I read this year, 5 stars. And on the flip side of that, let's talk about A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I don't know the original story of Hades and Persephone, but I know it was probably done better than this book. This book was bad. This book had the worst writing of any book I have read in 2020. Oh my gosh. When I tell you, I wanted to DNF this book at every page, but because this was December and I want to reach my Goodreads reading goal, I read the whole thing. It was honestly not, whether the story was good or bad, it's honestly moot at this point, because the writing was enough that I feel like would make someone put it down. The story I think had very interesting elements, like Persephone, why Persephone was in the human world, who Persephone's relationship with her mother, Hades, how Hades kind of lives in the underworld. The way they incorporated the Greek mythology into the human world I felt was really interesting, but I was only interested in it for about 5 seconds before the writing took me straight out of that world. Oh my gosh, I've never had a book whose writing had discouraged me from wanting to finish it so much. So it's supposed to be a romance. It was read more like a memoir to Persephone for the first 100 pages, not a memoir, maybe just a bad autobiography. I don't have a lot to say about it. I think that Goodreads was hacked, which is where all these good reviews came up from, because it's not good. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so if you want to take a gander and don't want to spend your money on it, you have Kindle Unlimited, go ahead and try it out. But it was not the best. It was not the best. It was the worst, actually. It was just not good. And there's actually 2 more books in the series I will not be continuing on. I'm really okay with ending it here. I give it 1.5 stars. There's not much to say about this one. The next books I read were all manga. The next one is Devil's Line Volume 11. Devil's Line is my favorite manga of the moment. I absolutely loved it. This Volume 11 goes more into all of the side characters that are part of the secret organizations. I'm not going to go too into it because it's book 11. Like, if I say anything else, it's going to spoil the first 10 books. But just know I love Devil's Line. If you want to get into manga, I definitely recommend Devil's Line. It is for a little bit of an older crowd. I'd say like 16, 18 plus. It is set, like all the characters are college age, so, but I absolutely loved Devil's Line Volume 11, give it 4 stars. Second manga is Itarosanna Kiss. I hope I'm saying that right. Volume 1. I gave this one a 1 star. I will not be continuing on. First of all, illustration. I am not a fan of this illustration style. I know this isn't a very old manga, so the illustration side kind of reflects that, but it's where everybody has a very pointy jawline. Let me know if you read a lot of manga, you can probably discern different time periods of illustrations, but it was back during that time when everyone had a very triangle shaped head. And I could not get over that. I could not get over that. But even besides that, even if it was my favorite illustration side, I don't like this trope. I don't like this trope where the main guy is horribly mean to the main girl. Horribly mean, rude to her, and somehow she finds herself able to forget all of that and then fall in love. Or he has a change of heart after being horrible to her for 3 volumes. I don't enjoy that. That is not fun for me. I don't like mean people. You should not be mean. So when someone's mean for no reason, especially if they're mean on like the basis of classism because you're not as smart as me, I'm over it. So illustration style, the actual story is about a girl who, her father is kind of not the smartest. He's not the best at being a father. He's kind of cheap. So they built a new house. It actually burns to the ground because of some incident, and she and her father have to move into the house of his high school friend, who is the father of the most popular guy in school. This most popular guy is also the guy who she confessed to a weeks prior, and he just dissed her, saying that he doesn't date stupid people. Rude. So they move into the house, and she wants to kind of prove him wrong and get into the top 100 because he's always the first in class. She wants to be at least top 100 in class, but she's part of the class F, which is also the dumbest class in the school. Yada yada yada. He tutors her. She gets into class F, and he's trying to see her in a new light. But I'm just like, this is just reinforcing like the classism part of this book. I'm just not here for it. It's a 1 star. If you're new to manga, I don't recommend it. If you already read a lot of manga, I still don't recommend it. The next mangas I read were A Sign of Affection. I'm gonna put the author's name here again, but adored this manga. So this manga is very interesting. It is the first manga I ever read that features a person who is hearing impaired. So the main character, the main girl in this manga, primarily only communicates using sign language and like written notes or text messages. The story begins where she's on a train and someone is asking her for directions. She wants to write like, oh, I'm hard of hearing, or I'm hearing impaired, I can't hear you, can you write it down? But then a boy from her school actually comes up and helps the guy, and he kind of wonders like, why couldn't you help him? And she's like, starts saying like, oh, I only speak through sign language. So they start a friendship where she actually begins to teach him sign language, and she is starting to get like really interested in why he's so interested in learning. And I absolutely love this manga just because, first of all, it was the first manga that featured someone who was hearing impaired that I've read, and it was so interesting to see a little tidbits about Japanese sign language, because I wouldn't have thought it'd be like so astronomically different from American Sign Language, but it really is. And how all the Japanese idioms or the Japanese tropes are kind of fit into Japanese Sign Language. The author has a little bit of notes here and there, which I absolutely love. The story is really good so far. There's only 2 volumes out, I think, and I've read them both. It's very interesting. I really want to see how it goes, because it's kind of setting it up like this girl is having romantic feelings for this guy, but this guy is really trying to just kind of be friends with her so he can learn sign language and travel the world. So it's very interesting. So I want to see how that dichotomy works out. But I think this is such a cute manga to have found on Kindle Unlimited. The last manga I read was Shinobi Life, volume 1, 2, and 3. So this one, it was really interesting because it reminded me of Inuyasha. So if you watch Inuyasha, if you read Inuyasha, Inuyasha is about a girl who kind of can time jump, and a bunch of people who can actually time jump through the feudal era Japan into modern day Japan. So the same thing happens here actually. So there's a girl and a guy, a samurai from back in the day, who can time jump through feudal Japan and to modern day Japan. You know what, another thing about this is exactly Inuyasha, because the girl is also descendant of the princess that the main guy, the ninja guy, used to protect back in the feudal time. So they look identical. So he jumps without knowing it and assumes this girl's the princess and says, okay, I'm your bodyguard now. And then things ensue because, you know, they're able to time jump, and there's kind of a lot of just drama between the girl's family. The girl's father is nuts. The guy is really confused. It's a lot going on. They both kind of have individual storylines and are intertwined. And this one I'm gonna give 3 stars. I hope it's okay right now. I hope it gets better. I hope it gets more like Inuyasha, honestly, because that's honestly the only reason I'm reading it. But it's pretty good now. I think it's pretty good. I just want to know the characters more. The girl seems kind of cryy right now. The girl's father seems absolutely nuts. The ninja boy seems like the most interesting character so far. So I kind of want to see where it goes, but so far it's a 3 star. I think it's a light read. I think it's an older manga because the illustrations are kind of older, but all manga on Kindle Unlimited is pretty old. Why do I feel like this was the longest wrap up of my life? Well, anyway, so that is all the books I read in December. Please let me know what you read this December and what you're looking forward to reading in January. If you like this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.